which brings us to today's Facts are Facts. And have you ever thought about what is in an EV battery?
You know, I gotta say, I hadn't. And so this is a big topic, and we're gonna dive into it and talk about what these different kind of avenues with EVs are like. So our electric vehicles are powered a lot by minerals and metals like graphite, lithium, cobalt, nickel, and copper. All those materials are in high demand right now, driving the price of lithium up 400% back in 2021. So overall, electric cars need 6 times more minerals than gas-powered cars.
So we have to talk about the downside. Nothing's perfect, right? All of those minerals that we've listed, they have to be mined. And with demand skyrocketing, new mines are opening all around the world. It's an issue Julian Spector from Canary Media has written about extensively. So we want to jump right into this. What parts of the world are these minerals being mined?
Yeah, well, great to be here. So there's mining happening in a lot of different places. For lithium specifically, there's a little bit in the U.S. and Nevada. And in fact, the U.S. used to be a world leader in lithium mining, but that was more 40, 50 years ago. And we've moved away from it in the 80s and 90s. But then in South America, Chile, Argentina, they get lithium from brines, where you have to kind of leave it out in the sun to evaporate, so you get the good minerals from in there. Australia is a big player in mining generally and in lithium, and China has a lot of resources as well.
And so, Julian, dive a little deeper with us and talk about what does mining do to the ecosystems? How does it impact this as we're talking about eliminating fossil fuels, but now we have to expand our mining footprint?
It's definitely not great for the local environment. You know, it's very destructive, whether you're digging a giant hole or pulling out this brine and covering the landscape in these pits to hold the brine. And then, of course, you have tailings, which might be toxic kind of waste materials from the mining operation. And then it takes energy and therefore usually carbon emissions to dig it out, and then transport it to where it can be processed, and then transport it to where it gets turned into batteries and reaches the consumer. So there is a lot of local environmental impacts that are happened in the course of building these batteries and clean energy technologies that help the whole global environment with climate change.
Let's talk emissions for a second from mining specifically. So how do the emissions from extracting fossil fuels compare or, to those that what we're mining, and, talk about those emissions with EVs versus, gas-powered cars?
Yeah, so fossil fuels today we are extracting out of the ground and then burning, and you don't get those back. So you can think of this as shifting from the world where we're extracting oil, gas, coal, and switching to extracting minerals. If you're looking at the kind of lifetime carbon emissions of a vehicle, the minerals and battery minerals component isn't that big in the long term. Like an electric vehicle is still much lower emitting over its lifetime than a typical gas-powered or internal combustion engine vehicle. So you could think of it as, there's emissions from manufacturing the vehicle, and then there's going to be a bit of additional emissions coming from the minerals and the batteries going into it. So at the start of its life, the car probably encourages or produces more carbon emissions than an internal combustion car. But then as you drive it over time, you end up saving a lot of carbon with the battery nonetheless.
Yeah, Julian, you're bringing a great perspective here as we're looking at both sides of the EVs. And of course, there's so many benefits of them being on the roadways. But talk to us a little about what is the U.S. doing to prevent environmental or human impacts as we are looking more at where we source the EV batteries?
Yeah, so the U.S. Doesn't mine a lot currently, but there have been a lot of new investments in the recycling of battery materials, which we put billions of dollars in, both from private investment and from the U.S. government. And so we now have a whole flurry of recycling factories opening up in places like Nevada, South Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, New York. And, so that'll help on the margins to begin with. Like we just we're nowhere near recycling enough materials to meet our needs. But in theory, maybe decades from now, we could actually replace most of the new mining with recycling the existing metals that are out there circulating in batteries. There are a lot of folks who hope to get new mines open in the U.S., and the theory being they would operate with better labor and environmental protections here than in some of the other parts of the world that currently do more of the mining. But because we have strong environmental regulations, it's not so easy to just go open one up. And if people live near it, they probably don't want to be next to a giant pit and all the noise and all the hubbub coming from that. So we're in that phase now of navigating how do you balance kind of community concerns and environmental concerns with this real need to get more battery minerals out into the world, because we don't have enough as it is.
With the U.S. slowly getting into this and opening our own mines, talk about what that could do to our domestic economy.
Yeah, well, we've seen a real transformation of the domestic economy since the Inflation Reduction Act passed, and it's been over a year, and the incentives in that kicked off a whole bunch of new factory openings to actually make batteries in the U.S., and it's tens of billions of dollars. I think it keeps growing, but I think it's past 80 billion, up towards maybe 100 billion just to create batteries, mostly for electric vehicles in the U.S. So we don't have to rely on China or other parts of the world we maybe don't want to depend on. So that's new, and so now that we're actually making the batteries domestically, there's suddenly buyers for domestic minerals if we start producing them. So it's kind of this whole industrial policy where we're making good headway getting the battery production up and running, and then the electric vehicle factories, and then we're not so great at the more upstream where you're like getting the minerals out of the ground and refining them. But now that we have policies that kind of give better tax credits to cars with domestic materials, as well as other incentives around domestic production of these critical minerals, there's certainly more action than we've seen really ever before.
Well, we hope to see even more action as things may get centered in the U.S. as we continue this conversation. Thank you so much, Julian Spector from Canary Media, for joining us. And of course, you can find out more of his work at canarymedia.com.